this will be an experience for me.
Oh, well, yeah, on the other side of the camera, I suppose, after all the years of being the chap asking the questions, to finally have the lights shone on you.
I found it very strange. I've done radio interviews with some of the work I've been doing in the last 5-6 years. Very strange being on the receiving end. Anyway.
Well, of course, being an ex-policeman, most of the time I was asking people questions via phone books, but I promise not to bring them along to this one, Murray.
So it's true.
Did I say that? All right, mate. Tell me about Al Mathana Task Group in Iraq.
AMTG2. Okay, so this was the second round of Iraq into Al Mathana. So this was supporting the Japanese engineers. Supporting Japanese who were running around rebuilding schools and stuff. And so we were providing effectively protection for them to do their job. We were co-located with the 2nd Parachute Regiment from the British Army, and they were doing their own thing. They're formidable bunch of blokes to hang out with, that lot. And really, it was part of the rebuild phase of Iraq. So it's post-invasion. We were trying to get it across to everybody that we were the nice guys. We're trying to help out and go around and sort of build some relationships. I had a lot to do with the local TV station, Al Mathana TV there, because it had a very big antenna. So in the invasion, somebody dropped a bomb on it. And so that had to get rebuilt. The Japanese filled it with lovely new Sony equipment. And then there was really, what do we now do with the TV station? So I had a lot to do with that as well.
Wow, that would have been pretty interesting. So the role you played was basically in communications, which is really important, but you also hold the combat badge. And I'm going to embarrass you here and know it. So tell me about that.
Well, so the combat badge in the Australian Army is actually, if you serve with a combat unit. There were some interesting events while we were there. One of them being a few mortar shells coming over the fence. But you know, when you say it like that, it sounds very important. That was happening every day in Baghdad and a lot of the other places. So we had a bit of that. There were a couple of close encounters. Certainly the 2nd Parachute Regiment went out and found some bad guys and got themselves dealt with them, let's just say, dealt with that. And a few things like that. But so we were always on a, let's not say a war footing, because that's just not true, but we were sure as hell checking routes, put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, just another day of mortars flying over, you know, yeah, the heavy rain with an expected afternoon shower of mortars.
Something like that, yeah. Well, there was a lot of things going on, you know, there were Japanese, there were English, there was training teams, and every now and then the Americans would drop in an Apache helicopter to say hello or something. So it was a busy little place.
I imagine. What's your take on Iraq? Was it kind of a worthwhile venture for the country? I'd just be interested on your take.
Look, at the end of the day, I honestly think our involvement in Iraq was, I think it was John Howard at the time as the Prime Minister, was done as part of a trade-off to get a trade deal that he was doing with the US. And I think it was part of the whole process of, you know, diplomacy with the US at the time. Our role in Iraq as Australia, I mean, let's leave the invasion to one side, because we were certainly active in that, and certainly special forces were very active in that space. Yeah. But in this rebuilding phase, you know, we could have done a lot of things. We could have gone out and gone after the bad guys. We could have done all sorts of things. We didn't do a lot of that. So there was a bit of a risk-averse, if you like, strategy obviously in place. I never saw it. I've never given it. But it was pretty clear that's what we were doing. So it's like, the way I can explain this is, it's like you don't get to choose when you're a soldier, right? So this is the question about everybody's going to ask about Afghanistan. Did we do a good job while we were in Iraq? Yeah, we did. We did everything we were asked to do, and we did it well. Did we get a choice about whether we went or not? No. Right? You just get sent. You just go. And so you go and do the absolute best you can, and then the politics of it happens somewhere else. And as it turned out, you know, we left and it all went straight back to Clag. But so was Afghanistan. You could argue about Panama with the Americans. You can argue about any of those, about any sort of war since World War II, really. You end up with a similar result. So was it worth it? Look, I'm glad I went, because it was for me, it's the old, you've done all that training over years and years and years and years and years. Why train for a marathon and then never run one? right? So you go and you do it. I'd never do it again. And it was a hard place to be. It was a hard job being locked in Camp Shitty, as we called it, Camp Smithy. It was just this horrible little thing in the dirt that we all lived in, and all living on top of each other. And so cabin fever, which is the very polite version of it, got going in there. There was a lot of, we'll just call it friction is the easiest way. So by the time I got on the plane to come home, I was quite happy to come home, put it that way. When you're a soldier, you're an instrument of government. I mean, it's just, for a person like me who came up as a journalist, a lot of people looked at me and went, what in the hell are you doing pulling on a uniform? Because people are going to tell you what to do and you are not going to like it. And they were right. So, there was a lot of that went on, but I was brought in for my special skills. And surprisingly, I worked incredibly well with the Special Forces guys. We had a great relationship because they understand what a specialist does, right? And I remember them saying to me very early on the piece, said, if the media comes out our front door, we're going to ring you and we're going to expect you to turn up. You want somebody shot, you're going to call us and we're going to bring a machine gun and we're going to do it for you. So it was just, they understand specialists. And so we worked on really well. The regular army struggles a little bit with it because you're sort of not part of that machine. But look, like I said, it's a job. You are an instrument of government. You go where you're sent. You do your job to the absolute best of your ability. You come home.
Yeah. It's so like policing in that way. You don't have to agree with every law. You don't have to. Think that you arresting someone for cannabis is going to change their life and make the society a better place. But you took the oath and you're doing the same thing. All right. Well.
Yeah, I mean, without wanting to start a huge, oh my God moment, I mean, police running around at the moment enforcing COVID, that's got to be causing some friction inside the force. Anyway.
Yeah, and look, I won't go too much into that, but I got out of the job just after COVID, but I can speak about the time when I was there. And there were discussions about where it was going. And there were some concerns about some of the, what are the implications? Funnily enough, everyone's got this idea that all coppers everywhere are authoritarian, oppressive, big government people. And that's kind of not the case. They're big believers in due process. It's like, are they going to come down on the side of protection of the public generally? Yes. Yes, they are. But are they big believers in due process? And do they have to believe that the laws that they're enforcing, which includes obviously the protection for the offenders that they're arresting, are basically just? And the answer to that is yes. So without trying to represent anything, I can indicate that there were some conversations. But this is about you. So let's talk about the commendation you won. And again, I'm sorry to kind of embarrass you, Murray, but it's... you've got a commendation signed by a Major General here, commending your actions for the Black Hawk tragedy. Could you just refresh so there might be some people out there, because it happened some time ago now, just really outline the tragedy itself to give the viewers some context.
Yeah, so look,
tell us what happened.
So June 1996. And it was a training exercise with Special Forces and 5th Aviation Regiment, plus a few other people who were up there at the time. And it was a training exercise essentially to approach, it was a counter-terrorism exercise. So they were approaching bad guys, and they were using a formation that they very rarely use because it's just inherently risky. And so 3 Black Hawks, I've only got 2 hands, coming in very low, and then reveal up on target, like so. 3 of them, 1 in the middle, lined out like so. The guy in the middle has rotor blades spinning on both sides of him by the outside helicopters. And there's 2 other helicopters out here with sniper rifles picking off targets for you. The idea is to get the soldiers on the ground, out of the helicopters, fast rope them down, in they go, do their job. Black Hawks fly around and support, and then everybody goes home. It went wrong. Look, I mean, Black 1 on the left-hand side, if I like, we're flying this way, turned, they revealed on target. We believe that they sort of went, oh shit, we're not quite on target, we're slightly off. Black 1's turned, forgotten probably where he was, and we've never been able to know because he died in the crash. hit Black 2 in the middle, rotor strike, turned off. This guy was Black 2, took a very direct hit, lost his tail rotor in the process. Black 1 rolled over on fire, went in upside down. It didn't end well for anybody. I think only one person got out of that from memory, that airframe. Black 2 went in without a tail rotor and managed to get some sort of a landing. I can't remember what the exact technical term is for it, but it was the seats and everything are designed to take about a 10G hit in the helicopter, and sure enough, they all strike down. So the pilots actually end up sitting down. The blades came off, the engine shut itself down, aircraft on fire, and lots of dead and wounded people in the back. And it sort of went from there, really.
Yeah, actually, really quickly, obviously, I'll get you to continue the narrative with your involvement and how you won your commendation. But I know some of the police that were there when the bodies were recovered, and the bodies were brought into Townsville. And they formed something that I found out about later on, and I've actually seen the film of it. They formed a little guard of honor, just like a police guard of honor for the guys when the bodies were being brought out and taken to the thing, which I've got to say warms my heart. And to acknowledge the ultimate sacrifice that these men made. But do go on.
But look, so the crash happened. I wasn't up there. I've been flying with these guys the week before. With 5 Aviation, not the SAS. And I had a fair bit of experience with these. I knew all the various people. I knew that they were in town because they'd come to see me as a public affairs officer, because we'd had an incident probably the year before where some people fell off a fast rope, and we didn't know what to do about it when the media started ringing. So we had open contacts going. Anyway, so this has happened. Obviously, the safety net's gone off, the radio net's gone off, and the duty officer sitting in Townsville has rung the brigadier first and gone, "We've got a real big problem here." Rung me second and gone, "Murray, I can't tell you much because I don't know much." So this is 7 o'clock at night. "I don't know much, but we've got 2 helicopters had a mid-air crash, blah, blah, lots of people hurt. That's about all I could tell you. I've got to go," and hung up on me. Well, so I had a number for where the SAS guys were. And so I picked up the phone and rang that and got somebody on the other end. So, "Hi, it's Captain Cornish from Public Relations." And all that. "No comment, sir." Bang, and hung up. I went, "Well, that's weird." So then I rang the control room at 5 Aviation and got the same treatment. Bang, the phone went down. I went, "Righto, some bad shit's going down here."
This is bad.
So I pulled on a uniform quickly on the premise that the hospital would be involved somehow. Drove like a bat out of hell to the Townsville General Hospital. Arrived as 5 Black Hawks sort of sat down. They're actually already on the ground. The media had already figured out what was going on. They were all standing around. So wounded being moved, ambulances running around. You can try and imagine the scene, right? And so I got on a headset to one of the helicopters, hoping I'd know who the pilot was and try to find out what was going on. And all I got was, "Oh, mate, it's just a mess up there. It's a mess up there. Look, we've got to go. We've got to go back." Bang, the headset was gone. And they flew away. So thinking they were going to bring back another load. At that point, there was a whole lot of media controlling going on. I don't know if you've been around Black Hawks, but five aircraft coming off the ground at the same time will just about knock you over, right?
Yeah.
And so trying to get very enthusiastic TV cameraman out of the way and all that sort of fun stuff. Anyway, so they've all headed off to the hospital because the Black Hawks have gone. The ambulance, the guy in charge, it turned out, I think, if my memory serves me correctly, they were actually doing a practice run for a disaster that afternoon. And so I got the phone call, and so they just all turned up. Anyway, so the guy who was in charge came over to see me. So there's a line of ambulances now sitting there waiting for the second wave to come in. And he came over to me and just said, "Murray, they've run out of capacity in the hospital. We're going to have to take them to Mackay or Rockhampton or somewhere." And I looked at him and gone, "Like hell." He went, "We've got no choice. Sorry, I'm just following instructions." And I went, "Well, stay there. Let's see what we can do." And rang back to the duty room and just like, "Get the brigadier down here and now." Rang the head of the colonel who ran the hospital on Laverick Barracks, got her and just said, "This is what they're saying to me. Blah, blah, blah. Do I have the authority to do whatever I need to do down here?" And she went, "Yeah, you just do whatever you have to do." And so I said, look, can we bring him to Laverack Barracks? And she's like, no, probably not, but I'll see what I can do, and hung up. Meanwhile, what I didn't understand is the safety net was going off, and they were organising to fly directly there. They were never going to come via Townsville anyway. So that was all happening in the background. It turned out they didn't need to bring another load of helicopters in, which was good. Anyway, commander arrives, quick chat with him, and took him over to the hospital. We both went into the emergency ward to try and get some idea of what was going on. He was allowed to stay because he was a brigadier. I was a captain, so I got thrown out.
Yeah.
The head doctor just said out. So I was left to deal with the media pack outside. And of course, the thing with these things is, I was very conscious of it, having been a journo for most of my life. You know, the worst information is no information in these things. You've got to be telling people what's going on. And so we're trying so hard to get updates. But because the crash was so severe, the people who were up there didn't know. Right? And we were actually trying to do head counts in the hospital. And we're trying to do, there were people who were simply missing because the aircraft went in upside down on fire. There are bodies inside there, right? And you're not going to get anywhere near it. So we couldn't get a head count. We couldn't get, there were lots and lots of moving parts. Anyway, so
what a nightmare.
I'm trying to keep them up. Oh, mate, it was big. So, and people are turning up at the hospital going, Murry, what's going on? With people's wives and stuff. I'm going, well, I don't know either. And there's all this other stuff going on. And then one of the radio journos has gone out because they're doing on-the-hour updates and gone, there's more than 35 people dead up there. So somebody's rung me to tell me that this is what's going out on radio. And I've walked over to him and gone, where the effing hell did you get that from? And I go, well, you're not denying that it's 35. We don't fucking know. So shut up. Anyway, so trying to control that level of sort of hysteria. Anyway, cut a very long story short, it was all very tense, as you can imagine. There's just people. Anyway, the brigadier and I think it was the OPSO from 5 Aviation Regiment, and we've got to do this. Went out, talked to the pack, gave the pack something to work with, and effectively it was, there's been a tragedy. It just goes to show how hard these people train, what they do and the dangers involved in this level of training, that sort of thing. But we really don't have any answers yet. So it's just dark. We're working on it. So that was enough for the media pack to sort of thin out and go off and the TV guys to take off, right? Because there was no live crosses back then. It was all on tape. And they all went off, and basically everybody sort of thin-aired from there. The hospital made contact with me and said, are you running this or are we running this? I went, no, we're running it. This is ours. And so I took all the phone calls. So my phone's going absolutely red hot. I'm trying to think what else was going on. I was talking to Canberra at the same time, and they're going, you're in charge on the ground, dude, because we can't get to you. With the media stuff, so it's all yours. You're flying it. We'll fly what we can from Canberra and let you know what's going on from here. Blah, blah, blah. And everybody sort of set up their networks. And I drove back out to Laverack Barracks, and much to my surprise, the base was locked down. And so the gates were locked down, and the soldiers on the gate saw me come around the corner. So somebody had given them my rego number and just opened the gate to go. They're all waiting for me. I'm like, who's waiting for me? And I'm like, what's going on here? And got to, it was full. And I got into the duty officer, and here's my CO, the OPSO, duty officer, you name it, they're all there. I walked in and they've all looked at me and go, oh, he's here. What's going on, Murry? I'm going, you're supposed to be telling me. I don't know. So went through everything I've been doing, and really then just started fielding phone calls, and it went like that for 2 days. Got my, I sent the duty driver around to get my photographer out of bed, who was completely unaware that any of this was going on, because by this stage, it's, I don't know, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, something like that. And, Corporal O'Donoghue, he's come around, he's very grumpy, he's been dragged out of bed because he thinks it's an exercise or something. I've told him what the problem is, I've told him what's going on. He's just gone, oh, what? He's gone inside, and I wonder where he's going. He comes back out with a cup of coffee for me, pushes a cigarette in the corner of my mouth, lights it, goes, right, I'm going to go have a shower, get a uniform on, and let's go. And right, so we got him in the next car, got him up there to get some photos of the crash site so that the media didn't feel the need to try and drive up on the high range or do anything completely stupid. I closed the airspace over it to civilian air traffic, just in case somebody tried to hover a helicopter over it.
Yeah. It's going to happen.
Carbon fibre burning, right, turns into really nasty dust, right? So there was all that. So we closed all that. And I think my boss came in to see me about 4 o'clock in the morning. By this stage, the BBC was on, ABC America was on. My phone just wouldn't shut up. So I was on the 3rd phone battery. So I had people running around charging phone batteries for me. He just said, just keep doing what you're doing for as long as you can. So we went like that for 3 days, I think it was. I think, we put the Brigadier on the road the next morning. We did, live crosses into Channel 10, Channel 9, Channel 7, ABC, local radio station. And then he just went, I'm done. I've got important things to do, Murray. And he took off. And then it was just back to me, just sitting there. Or in the back of my mind, I was very conscious of what a total balls up that whole, the way military handled the Voyager disaster. Super secret. We won't tell anybody. Wrong approach. And so I was very conscious that we couldn't do that. So the next day, we organised a Black Hawk and we flew the media up over the site so we could control it on the site. So they got their photos out of the Black Hawk and a video out of the Black Hawk, and then we brought them back again. That sort of stuff. And we supplied photographs and we did that sort of stuff so that the investigation could get underway. And there were just people appearing. I remember turning up to the hospital and there's a general standing on the steps doing a press conference. I'm like, who are you and where did you come from? Anyway.
Excuse me, sir. Whom are you? Why are you speaking to the media? And can you come over here and respectfully, sir, now?
And that's pretty much what was going on.
Come here.
That's all. I'd gone in there because one of the photographers from one of the papers had gone into the hospital, was trying to take photos of people in hospital beds. And so security was running around and they're trying to chase him out. And I've turned up in uniforms going, well, if I find him. So, get control of that situation. Once again, feed the monster. So we gave him the photos, we did the stuff, and that seemed to placate it briefly.
Yeah, and they got a job to do.
You have to have the relationships first. If you don't if they don't know to ring you and don't trust to ring you, it will go everywhere. And so then it becomes scattered. Because one of the things we were doing was pouring cold water on bullshit theories that were just appearing as the night went on. Right. So some engineer came out from somewhere and said, it's clearly a metal failure. And we're like, who is this idiot? Right. And then somebody else has popped up and gone, you can't have that many people on 2 helicopters because they don't carry that many people. I've been on a Black Hawk before. I'm like, what? You can swing a couple of Land Rovers under them. I don't know what you're talking about. So, so in the information vacuum, this stuff starts to grow, and you've got to keep pouring the cold water on the bollocks. But also then you've got to provide something that's real all the time. And so it was just full on. It really was.
Yeah. No, and again, to give the journalism their due, it's a tough gig. It's always been a tough gig, but it's especially tough today. And the mainstream media, as we know it, as I knew it as a child born in the 70s, and as you know, is dying. So let's talk about that. Why is the mainstream media dying? What's happening?
Look, it's a very long answer, really, but it's the easiest way I can explain the way I see this happening is once upon a time, if you're a public relations person, so I'll put it that way, right? And you were trying to get a story about, I don't know, pens and paper out there. There was a newspaper, there were 4 or 5 TV networks, 2 radio networks, and that was it. And you were competing for that space, right, to get your story across. Right? So very, very limited space, very controlled space. Now it's the total reverse. There is so much space out there that it's almost impossible to get heard. So you can scream your head off on YouTube, on Facebook, on anywhere you like, right? But getting people to hear you is the challenge. And so it's gone that way. It's actually gone out to the point where this, what we call mainstream, I just call old school media, right, it's old school, right? So it's losing its relevance. And because everybody can get information at their fingertips by literally clicking on a mouse, right? And this is also where the disinformation things become so bloody easy, because you can just plant disinformation out there. Bad news travels better than good news. Put it out there, it'll start to move around your social media channels. So there's a relevance argument going on in old school media, and it will come down to, I suspect, an on-demand process. You know, sitting down and turning on the TV at 7 o'clock because I want to watch the ABC News.
Yeah.
People's brains just don't work like that anymore. You know, they pick one of these up and they look
Exactly.
to find out what's going on. You know? And that's where they're getting a lot of their information. And you've got to understand that thing is one of the most powerful communications tools ever built. Like, there's been nothing like it in history. You know? The amount of information you can get off one of these phones, you know, is just extraordinary. I mean, it's Star Wars stuff. So people don't understand how much technology has reached into that space and taken away the relevance of it. So do I need to pick up a paper in the morning to read it right before I go to work, which is what I always used to do. You know, read the paper before you do anything so you know what's going on. It'll come to me on demand. I'll get it as updates. It'll just feed through. So old school media is struggling for traction out there because it's not very convenient anymore.
I want to make an observation, and I just want to get your take on it. Now, I'm sure I don't need to tell you this, but I'm not asking you to endorse, disendorse, agree or disagree. I'm going to make a statement. I just genuinely know. I just genuinely want to know what you think. Now, I'm an ex-copper, as you know, and I looked at the mainstream media's response to the George Floyd death and the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, It's about creating a narrative. You know, there is always a narrative. It's not just about telling a story, reporting a story. There is always a narrative behind that. Now, the narrative that was propagated here, or overseas, and including here in Australia, was that the police are out to murder Black people, and the police inherently target and pick on Indigenous Australians, and that the deaths in custody is evidence of that. The police are an inherently racist organisation. There is no way I would have joined something that was akin to the Gestapo or the SS, and that's kind of how things were portrayed. So, to me, that was just not true. It's just a false narrative. In fact, it was a distortion so much as it became a lie, and an easily disprovable lie, because all you had to do was get on the use an obscure source like Google and get onto these this obscure fact-finding thing called Google.
Yeah, nobody's ever heard of.
No one's ever heard of it. And this other equally obscure institution called the Australian Bureau of Statistics, to find out that it was an easily disprovable lie. And I'll put the stats up during the interview, it's just the source and the stats. Now, but the mainstream media, almost to a person, with a couple of very notable and brave exceptions, were upholding and validating this false narrative. So I think, I just like your comment on that, and I sort of think that's linked to the death of the mainstream media, me personally. I'm just curious as to what you think.
Yeah, look, it's a complicated one. When you say narrative, there is a blurry line between news and comment and sort of current affairs entertainment these days. The line is very blurry. And I can remember Gerald Stone, who was the first producer of 60 Minutes. I think that's right. And he was talking to the Adelaide Press Club. This is a long time ago, right? When 60 Minutes had first appeared. And all of these journalists fanging in, but this isn't journalism, this is blah, blah, blah. And he virtually stood there and just went, I don't know what you're all getting so upset about. It's entertainment. Why do you think it's anything else? Right? And that's pretty much what he said. Or words to that effect. Please don't, it's a long time ago, but that's effectively what he's done, right? And you go, okay, so this is where it's all going. So when you talk about narrative, news and purist news has its own little category under the Act, and it has specific ways that it behaves, right, or it's meant to behave. Now, I didn't see, personally, a narrative in mainstream news. I saw stuff coming out in all the other places about how big is this problem and are these protests justified, and therefore the narrative that you're talking about, right? And I certainly saw it appear, but I also saw a lot of holders, effectively what people were doing was covering protests. Here's the protest, here's all the shit that's going on, that sort of stuff. Was there a narrative there? Yes, there was I would say it wasn't in the news cycle. It depends on your definition of news. And so once again, we come back one. So this is another story from Iraq. When we were sitting in Iraq, one of the things I did there was I watched everything. right? So local TV, BBC, blah, 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 you name it, right, on what anybody was saying about Iraq at any given point in time. The Americans hated Al Jazeera. If you remember the tank, right? Okay, yeah, that was a pretty clear get up here, right? Al Jazeera, and every time I watched, because I could see the intel reports coming in on certain incidents around us, Al Jazeera was spot on the dot every single time, almost faultless with their numbers and their everything else, and blah, blah, blah. But the way Western media interpreted Al Jazeera, the Americans weren't going to let them into America because they were clearly pro-terrorist, right? Even though they were blindingly accurate. So where I'm going with this is there is a thing of opinion that goes across the top of all these things all the time, and I'm not quite sure where and how it always creeps in. So is there a narrative? It's become more and more a feature, yes. So there is what's the word I'm looking for? There's a grab you need, because media's relevance that we were talking about before.
Yep. So
the harder you go in and the more dramatic you can make it, the more likely you are to get a viewer or a reader or whatever. Right?
Yeah. Okay.
So that is undoubtedly becoming part of the process. There's no question of it. And in fact, I've seen blatant examples of it in a couple of cases where I've even complained to news directors about the behaviour of certain people and nothing ever gets done. So hence I'm not a journo anymore. So,
but it kind of links in, like if you divorce facts from a narrative, as you're pointing out with that Al Jazeera thing, you kind of like, I don't know, like are you getting into the stage where you're distorting what's happening? And I think a really good example of something else you've done is the Reporting Islam project. I'm going to come out and declare an interest, I suppose. I think that was magnificent work. I've got a lot of very good Muslim friends here. I have a lot to do with the Islamic community. I'm friends with the local Imam and an excellent local Imam who unfortunately had to go to Western Australia over there. This is close to my heart. But there was you did the Reporting Islam project, which was fundamentally a project around, look, how are we going to tell a story? So, for example, the Link Cafe siege or these bombings are happening without creating a narrative that all Muslims are terrorists. How are we going to do that? So that's a kind of de facto recognition that it's like, okay, we've got to be careful. We've got to report things. We've got to be accurate, but we've got to not feed into a false narrative. And then you've got to balance that stuff with the Christchurch massacre. So how are we going to tell that story without feeding into the narrative that Australian society is fundamentally, to its core, anti-Islamic and a racist place that hates people from the Middle East? That's got to be tough, and that's something that I've always felt a degree of sympathy with for the media.
Yeah, look, it's to come back to where we were before, and then we're heading towards the Reporting Islam. One of the things that's become very clear to me since really leaving the media, probably clearer than when I was a journo for some unknown reason. Maybe my brain just works better now. I've got rid of the lump. Is facts alone won't tell a story. People won't stick to a set of facts. Right? So if you just go up and ram facts down people's throat, it doesn't achieve anything. You're not communicating. People just they turn off. It's got to be in the context of a story that they can engage with to understand why they're listening to these facts. I'm sure there are people who go out and do homework because they're looking for a fact. That's very different to taking it from somebody like you or me. I can just sit there and go, the numbers are, what have you communicated? Probably bugger all.
Yep.
Right? So narrative or storytelling is an inherent part of journalism in a sense, in the way you structure. Okay. So when we did the Reporting Islam thing, the Reporting Islam project was, and I got approached to do this because of my experience in Iraq and because of the long story, I knew the people involved. But it was really to go into newsrooms and make people think and go, what do you actually know that you think you know? Yeah. Right? And work them. So what we did was we do a session where we had, a specialist who would just do a little talk about this is the facts about Islam as opposed to what you think might be thinking. And then it was up to me then to go, as the journo who's run lots of newsrooms and everything else, was then to start running scenarios and start messing with their heads, right? And to get them to think about things as we went, and to find, where there were inherent biases and where there were facts that were simply missing, and why don't you know the local imam? Why haven't you ever approached him, right? Stuff like that. And it was really a project to get people to think. Simple stuff like, discerning between Muslims and Sikhs. Most people don't know. Most people can't tell the difference. I mean, there were Sikhs getting attacked in the US, it's just, so all this sort of stuff going on. So it's just, come on, guys, pull away and have a think, because your brain's been filled with whatever it's been filled with, right? And I can sit here and probably say, and if you had religious studies at school, they probably helped. That sort of stuff, and it's probably in their heads, and you got to get out of there. I mean, I've had journo flash moments where I've been writing stuff, and you sit there and you go, "Oh God, I've got it all wrong. Oh God," and the whole realization goes over you. You just go, "Oh, I completely missed it," and you go back and you have to rethink the whole thing, right? And so it's really just to create that moment in people's heads, and it seemed to work.
Yeah, and look, that's good on you, because I think this is part of what's fundamentally human psychology. We live in narratives. Human beings, we're storytelling creatures, but we don't just tell stories. We actually live in and create a story. So it's the story of your own life, like who you are, where you're going, what you're doing. You know what I mean? This narrative, the way that we approach narrative is so important. Like you said, facts by themselves mean nothing. They kind of don't mean anything unless you putting them in the context of where you are, who you are, what you're doing, what your aims are. So if you're seeking a whole bunch of facts to validate a pre-existing bias that you have in your head, well, you're falling. You know what I mean? And you say to yourself that you're not lying. Like, that happened. How can you deny that? Whereas if you don't kind of, if you're not seeking sort of stuff, there was this great conversation, and I'll put it in the hyperlinks. There's a brilliant young academic in America called Colin Hughes. He's brilliant. And just recently he interviewed, and he's an African-American chap, and he interviewed an African-American journalist who is like, just for this, American society is racist. Like, the whole system is just against, whole system is just against African-American people. And Hughes, who clearly has a degree of ambivalence, like when you talk about it, he goes, well, yeah, yes, these things exist, and yes, like, he's not Thomas Sowell. It's just out there going, it's kind of codswallop. Sowell is very dismissive. Like, you see some really credible African-American academics who are fundamentally just so dismissive of this narrative. You can tell that Hughes entertains it. But he even said, and he was brilliant about it, he phrased it so well. He said, look, I've researched this. I'm kind of a bit of an expert in this area, and the facts just don't fit the narrative that you're portraying. Like, how do you feel about that? What are we going to do about this when the facts don't fit the narrative that you're telling, or you're cherry picking things again, you can't say that this murder, that copper didn't kneel on George Floyd's head. You can't say that didn't happen. Incidentally, I don't want to go too much on this, but in all the court stuff, it was never led anywhere that happened because of his color. Like, there was some terrible policing, and that, it's because the guy's a badly trained thug, I would suggest is why it happened. But it has nothing to do with the fact that he had melanin in his skin. And Hughes beautifully puts this across. So it really concerns me, because these narratives that are in our society, they're kind of tearing us apart. But we really are at a genuine crossroads in history where I don't trust, when I say the mainstream media, I don't mean every journalist out there. Peter, I'm talking about, I trust you, Tom, I trust you, Charlie, I trust you, all the journos who I know are going to be watching this, Janelle, I know, I know and trust all of you guys. But the ABC is ironically a source, you know, and we're the most trusted kind of like, well, are you? The SBS I find laughable, and NITV, oh my God, but the narrative that those guys portray, I slap my head at the distortions. Again, they're kind of cherry picking. That you can't say that this particular story that you're telling isn't true, but is the narrative true? And the answer in my head is not. But look, how about?
Well, I was just going to say, because part of the narrative, right, and this is the thing that people forget when you're talking about relevance of old school media, they will pick a yarn that they know is going to get a reaction because they want to be relevant, right? And I've seen it happen 100 times, and just go, that's not news. What's this crap? You know. And there is that goes on, and so that's the cherry picking you're talking about to some degree. If they know they're going to get a reaction out of it, they'll do it. I mean, we're at a turning point, not just with media, we're at a turning point with politics, we're at a turning point with lots of things.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of politicians running around out there at the moment, dropping stuff on Twitter designed to get an angry reaction.
Exactly.
You know? That's what it's designed to do. You know? And they're out there feeding that machine. So we've reached a turning point for a lot of things, I suspect. So not just media, but I think it's in terms of politics, certainly in communications, we have reached a very interesting juncture. And what's going to fall out of this pandemic, with all the disinformation and the crap flying around out there, is going to be a lot of people are going to go back and have a very, very long, hard look at how this is working. So it will be very interesting to see.
One of the other interviews that I've had is Dr. Paul Boddington. Excellent interview. Have a look at it, and I'll put the hyperlink in there. She's an expert, an international expert on artificial intelligence and big tech generally. So she's given the stuff that she writes has influenced legislation in the United Kingdom. And she's an expert who gives information to international bodies. She's amazing. And one of the things that she throws in is the technological side of things. So it's not just this narrative, that narratives can be like viruses in your head that you kind of can't get rid of. Like Jung said that people think that they have ideas. That's not what happens. Ideas have people. And it's kind of like they possess you. An idea can possess a person, which I think is brilliant. When you link that with something that Dr. Boddington said, she goes, look, Matt, and I'm paraphrasing here, but I'm quite sure I'm getting it right. She says, it's kind of comparable. What is happening now with technology is comparable to big tobacco, when they found out that tobacco is something that it makes you addictive, that people get addicted to, and it's going to kill you. But they were still like, some 4 out of 5 doctors recommend, Laramie cigarettes. The smoke, picture of a guy with a stethoscope around him, and they're still just telling those lies. You know what I mean? And that's a lie. Like, those guys were lying their asses off. She said, big tech knows now and has known for some time that they're actively biohacking into human psychology to get them to become addicted to tech. Like, that's happening. And so there's the circuits in your brain that you can tick that are related to gambling. So if you get a dopamine hit from looking at a news article that makes you feel good about yourself, or something else like this, and it's linked with the actual technology itself, like it's flashing in a certain way, it's doing all these sorts of, that's literally biohacking in. She said, I think there is going to be a case in the future, and I'm quoting almost word for word, that this will be viewed as some sort of crime against humanity, perhaps comparable to this idea that we're selling tobacco to minors. And when you link those two things with this idea of a narrative that possesses people, and that we're looking, that journalists, and again, they're not bad people, they're kind of doing their job. They're looking for a narrative that is going to possess a person, because there is this shouting crowd of narratives. And then you link that with tech. It's like, dude, where is this going? That is super sinister. There's something kind of like going on. And I think people can feel it.
Oh, and look, there are things that are just going out of date. I mean, you've got to think about this, and I know this is a really good dinner conversation to get everybody angry. Think about democracy, right? The Westminster system. What it was you rode in on your horse from your district, clock, for 3 weeks, to sit in Parliament House, argue on behalf of your local constituents, and then trot, 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 back on your horse, back to your local constituents to talk, right? It was you were the representative of that group. So the reason we all sat in a room together is because that was the only way you could actually do anything, because there was no bloody internet. There was nothing else. We don't need any of it anymore. So you don't actually have to all sit in a room and yell at each other anymore. You can do it over Zoom. You can do it anywhere you like. Right? The original construct is now going out of date. The original construct of old school news, which was I, as a person, run around and do all your research for you, right, to bring it all to you. I will get access to that politician. I will get access to that lobbyist. I will get access to that scientist. I will get access, and I will bring it all to you, nicely packaged so that you can watch it. Why do you need it anymore?
Yeah.
You just click on Google.
Yeah, and it's amazing. Like guys like me can ring up, and I'm not a journalist. I'm not a journalist bootlace, and I contact a woman on the other side of the world who's an internationally recognised expert on artificial intelligence and a compelling speaker. Although she talks really fast, like her brain works really, really quickly. So she talks really fast. I actually had to get her to slow down talking to her. I can go direct to the source and bring her expertise to the people of Cairns and North Queensland. Yeah, you're spot on. And we don't need someone to formulate it into a narrative, into a compelling narrative, or at least a contextual framework for people to understand the facts.
And to throw a really controversial one at you, and this is always good fun in dinner parties, is debate as a method of resolving an issue and coming up with legislation was formed around about the same time as fencing and duels to sort out your differences over your wife. So, if you want to throw all that out there. So, dueling's gone by the by.
Well, I don't know, has it? But yeah, well, I had a conversation with a chap who's very interested in politics, and he made the precise point. He's a great believer in democracy. He wasn't putting forward this idea of a rule by a technocratic elite, a kind of an oligarchy, I suppose, of sorts. But he said, look, let's think about the dynamics of democracy. And he said, when you're together as human beings, that changes your psychology. As soon as one human being goes from one environment into another environment, you naturally try and get a consensus between those other people. So what that means is there is a distortion of representation there straight away. And of course, if you get like a certain culture that's evolved, so let's use the Queensland example. Out of the 93 state electorates we have here, I think it's 72 or 73 are within a 250 kilometre radius of Brisbane CBD. So that means that it's metro-centric. Well, that means that the concerns of the electorate of the 93 people there are going to be predominantly metro southeast corner concerns. Well, when the person coming from, pick your name of electorate here goes down there, they have to compromise. That has to happen. And you have the psychological impact of dealing with a whole bunch of people who are going to treat you like an idiot redneck if you raise concerns that are just like, what are you even talking about? Fill in name of issue here. That's just not of concern to the good people of fill in name of metropolitan urban electorate here, idiot. So you've got arguably you've got a distortion of democracy there. One of the things this guy suggested was this. He goes, let's use technology. And when he used the Star Wars example.
Yeah, I've got a fan.
Well, he said, what about the Galactic Senate? And I went, oh, no, please, God, where is this going? He goes, no, think about it. Look, we've got this technology now. You've seen Star Wars where the Galactic Senate can like beam people in there. Is one other, imagine your local MP. He or she is talking to a constituent about something. And then he looks at his watch and goes, look, I'm sorry, Parliament is sitting now. I've just got to go beam in and speak to Parliament. So that person would be a true representative of that area rather than having to, because they're just not going to have the psychological thing. They're going to be a lot more, there's going to be a lot more debate. There's going to be, it's going to be a lot more adversarial. And I don't think those things are bad, incidentally, for really robustly defend that person they were just speaking to, because it's going to be so much more personal and so much more human. And it's a recognition of the human dynamics that were a lot more relevant when democracy was created, as you pointed out. I'd like you to talk about how the shutdown of mainstream media, I suppose, the collapse of the TV industry especially affected you personally. Can you talk about that? And don't be modest, because you were the youngest chief of staff in ABC TV Sydney, which is a very impressive achievement. And then in Townsville. So talk us through that.
Okay, so the chief of staffing job was, I went in as the afternoon chief of staff in Sydney, which was a fairly junior position. And then true ABC style, the main chief of staff decided they were going to London, and the ABC took about 8 months to recruit anybody. So, hey, presto, you're the chief of staff, right? Because you're the only person sitting in the chair. And so there I was as a 25-year-old trying to fly the biggest newsroom in Australia, yeah, boy, that had its moments, I can tell you. But that's, that was one of the high points, So I was there for the Newcastle earthquake. I was there for the Kempsey and Grafton bus crashes, a few things like that, organising helicopters to fly around and satellite link vans into Newcastle and all that sort of stuff. So, that was a hell of an experience. I don't think I'd go back to be a chief of staff again. It's very hard work. And then, so I was there as the chief of staff when the TV industry melted down. So that was the, what was that? The crash of 87, wasn't it? Which then turned into the Rust Belt of 91 or something. And so Channel 10 changed hands 3 times in a year, and Alan Bond owned 9 and went broke, and Packer bought it back for half what he sold it, and
that's right.
7 sold twice to Kerry Stokes, and the media industry just came completely unglued, right? There were no jobs. There were people, was it the Bridgeview Hotel in Sydney? So we used to go down there for a beer after work from the ABC, but so did everybody from Channel 9, because I was beside each other. And the stories that were being told down there, just when Packer took back over 9, there were just journalists sitting around getting drunk going, oh my God, this is the end of the world. Anyway, so cut a long story short, I ended up out of a job. I went off and worked for the Hinch program briefly for 3 months as a researcher, and didn't really want to stick with that. And I ended up landing a gig starting up the Townsville newsrooms for Win TV in Townsville and Cairns, and went up to do that, and did that for a couple of years. Decided that, Win TV was not for me. Then I went to do the army stuff. Then I went off to work for Rob Borbidge as an advisor. Then I came back at Channel 10 as the senior producer up there, and then as the news director, because the news director took off on maternity leave. And then this buyout by Southern Cross Media happened while I was in the chair. And we'd heard rumours about all this. And sure enough, Southern Cross Media walked in the door one day, sat everybody down, said, that's it. It's all over. We're closing the newsrooms down. We're not in the news business anymore. And there was I don't remember the exact mechanics of it, right? But they basically said, but we have to have a bit of a negotiation process with the unions around this. And there is you'll all get your redundancy payments and blah, blah, blah. And for whatever reason, whatever the hell was going through their heads, Canberra newsroom just walked out the door. I can't remember, there were a couple of others. Melbourne, they just walked out the door and said, stuff you, just right up yours. And these guys sat there and said, you could keep doing things if you want. We went, sorry, did you just say that we can put a news bulletin where tonight? Well, we can't really stop you. I went, bingo. And so off we went. And I remember ran out, we got everybody on the phone and went, this is it. We've just all been fired. But we've all just been retrenched, right? But they're going to let us do one last bulletin. What? But we don't want to work from. No, we make it about us.
Thank you.
We just said, thank you. We went great. 30-minute news bulletin about how we'd all been fired. It was hilarious. And it finished up with this piece of music at the end, ran for 3.5 minutes, a piece of Green Day, and it was just shots of everybody, bits of video. It was like a bit of a home reel, right? And the very last shot was Channel 10 local news sticker being flushed down the toilet. And that was the end. We all went home. It was hilarious.
Oh my God.
It was great. It went down in history. And then we all went down to the pub, as it turned out, and all the new sales guys who knew they were about to get fired anyway, they all put their Southern Cross Media credit cards on the bar. And I don't remember leaving. It was a big.
What are you going to do?
Really my last. Oh no, because I did some work for the ABC after that again. I've had, I think I'm on the track to have the most record number of farewells from the ABC. I think I'm at 9. So from various things I've done. But
bad penny can't get rid of you.
Yeah. And people ring you up and go, "Hey, Mars, what are you doing?" "I'm not doing much." "Oh, can you pop down?" So yeah, I went back as the producer in ABC TV News for 3 months for a mate who took over as the news director, and he needed a producer he could trust. So I went back into the fire, regretted it again. Anyway, that's what it is. It's the media industry. I'm out of it for a very good reason.
Well, we've talked about you getting out. Now let's talk about you getting in. Tell me about your first job in TV.
On TV, right? So I was a farm kid, right? So I ended up, my first gig in the media was with the Country Hour, with ABC Rural Radio. And I did that for about 3 years. Anyway, as part of the whole trying to make myself relevant to people, because everybody just thought I was a farm kid, an ABC job, I worked a lot with the mainstream news guys, radio and TV. And I ended up in Adelaide as the host of the Country Hour in Adelaide, but working very closely with a couple of mates on a few things. Anyway, Channel 10 was starting up in Perth. This is how far back this goes, right? So they didn't have a Channel 10 newsroom in Perth at the stage. So NEW 10 was starting up a new newsroom. NEW, whoopie-doo. And so the news director and the producer were very good friends of these people I'd been working with at the ABC. And I said, Mars, throw your hat in a ring. They're looking for journos, It's not like we're not trying to hire one person, trying to hire 10, right? Your odds are better. So, okay, but I don't know anything about TV. He said, "No, it's all right, we'll teach you." So went through the whole process of putting together a CV, got these guys to write me references, put all this stuff together. They said, got a call from Perth. I said, "Why don't you come and see us? We'd love to talk to you about this job." And I'm like, "Oh, shit, I've got nothing to show them." And so there was this whole messing around going on, trying to work out how we were going to do it. And in the end, what I did was I got a couple of his stories, his TV stories, and we re-edited them with my voice on them. And we've gone out and shot a couple of stand-ups of me doing stand-ups, so plugged them into the stories. Here was my demo tape, right? And so we took that with us. I took that with me to Perth, and they gave me the bloody job. Right? And so then the whole panic starts, but I don't know anything about TV. So there was this whole panic before I got there. Anyway, luckily, when I started, we were running 2 weeks of pilots, right? Make sure the studio worked, all the fun things that go with startups of newsrooms. And in this period of 2 weeks, the producer, who remained a very good mate of mine for years, he figured it out and just went, "You've pulled a Swifty here. You've never worked in TV, and you don't know what the bloody hell you're doing." And I found this out months later. And he went, so the news director apparently was really pissed off and was ringing people going, "I can't believe what you just sent us, you bastards. We've just paid for him to move here and everything else." So all this shit's going on in the background. And the producer, I saw him about a month later because, I was giving a bit of face. So I said, "So you worked it out?" I said, "Oh, yeah, I figured it out 2 days after you got here." I went, "Well, how come I didn't just get fired?" He said, "Anybody who's got the balls to pull that off deserves the job as a journalist. So you were in for sure." And so they made me the police roundsman for Channel 10 because I said, "You've got the balls to hang out with those guys. They're fucking great." And that's what happened. So I was the police roundsman for 12 months. It's hilarious. And so that's how I got the job with the ABC as the chief of staff. So that producer, Dave English, left Channel 10 and went to the ABC in Sydney, and they were looking for a chief of staff. Said, "Oh, we know just the bloke."
This guy who fakes it till he makes it. He's the man. He's you.
Exactly. This guy's got balls of steel. I will bring him across. So that's how that job actually happened. So that was Dave English and I followed each other around the country after all. That was hilarious. He eventually died of diabetes, which is very sad. But God, we had some good times, I'll tell you.
So tell me about the story that sticks most in your mind.
Stuff I've covered, I guess. Look, it's a hard one. I think I sent you a thing about an award I won very, very early in my journalism career. It was a Rural Reporters Award. And it was on a thing called Farming Enterprises. I hadn't been a journo for even 12 months. And I dropped on this because I got dropped into Wagga Wagga of all places as a radio journo. And there was this thing going on called Farming Enterprises. And I dug around it because a few people went, "We think it's a bit dodgy." And so I got into it. And sure enough, it was this whole front thing where people were promising to refinance farmers' loans with foreign currency transactions and all this other stuff. And the whole thing was a front, right? But it sucked thousands of people in. And anyway, so with all of 12 months experience, my bosses were getting a bit jumpy about the fact that I was chasing these guys around trying to find it. But anyway, we finally nailed the story, and I went to air with a story called Farming Enterprises or Fraud. It was about 10 minutes or 20 minutes of radio, and it knocked up an award. I hadn't even been working for the ABC for 12 months, which was, so that one sort of sticks in my mind. That was my first investigation piece. There was another one I did, I suppose, for in Channel 10 in Perth. It was about sodium cyanide. So the gold industry uses sodium cyanide to separate gold from rock, from ore, effectively, right? It's a critical part of the process. I went out to a truck crash as a police roundsman did, and the truck had gone off the side of the road, killed the driver, but he had a load of sodium cyanide on board and he landed in a creek, right? And so it sort of spurred me on to go, well, hang on, so if this stuff's going down the roads and it's as dangerous as everybody says it is it a controlled industry or not? And so, hey, presto, we found out it wasn't. And so this stuff was just being loaded up in trucks, driven from Kwinana in Perth down the highway to all the various gold mines, and there were no safety procedures in place for it. And so I ran a piece on that, which God, I can remember getting yelled at by the producers of the sodium cyanide and the EPA. He said, no, we do have controls over it, even though I'd just spoken to the chairman. He said, no, mate, you're onto it. Blah, 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 blah. And so, look, that was one that sticks in my mind because it was just, everybody said I was wrong. And it turned out we knew exactly what we were talking about. And that was a really nice piece. I really enjoyed doing that. Yeah, that one you're showing there, that's the Algiddy Farmers thing. I suppose as a police roundsman, as I was at the time, you've been to a lot of things, I'm sure. I can remember some horrific car crashes I've been to. Plane crash I went to at Leonora, killed 16 people, I think. No, 12 people. Came in a tailspin from high altitude pressurized plane. Not pleasant. I remember doing all those sorts of things, those sorts of stories. And some of the car crash stories I did were just horrendous. We did a story, and here we go. This is the cop narrative, and this is where you're going to jump on me. There was a car crash where a police car came off the road in Kings Park in Perth, broke in half. It was going so fast, killed both the people in the cop car, right? Anyway, cops came out and said, oh, no, they were doing the speed limit and blah, 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 and there'll be an investigation because you've got to be doing 160, 180 to split a car in half like that.
Easy.
So we went off and did our homework on it, and it turned out there was a bump in the road at the intersection they crossed, where if you go really fast, you get airborne, and the local hoons all knew about this. Right? You'll actually get some air under the car. Both of them were going on holidays the next day and going on leave, and we found it much later. They'd been to a barbecue and thrown back a few berries, but they were out hooning. And they'd been out hooning. They wrapped themselves around a tree and got themselves killed. Now, I put that story to air when we figured it out. You've got no idea how hard the cops and the police union came at me for the next 5 weeks. It was just full on. Anyway, it turned out we were right. So the inquest came back and went, yeah, blah, 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 and had traces of alcohol and the whole thing. So I remember that. That was me standing up against the system and the system trying to smash me down, and just stood my ground. And there was some other stuff we did over there too about, into WA Inc., which was the very early days of WA Inc. We were getting very suspicious about what was going on, and we did a lot of digging around on that. But then, the Channel 10 thing ended. I ended up being a chief of staff in Sydney, and so that one played itself out. And I suppose if you want one other, just for fun, there's a story I did in Channel 10 in Townsville, probably one of my last ones. There was a young cameraman that the other journos had been saying, oh, he never shoots the right stuff. And I went, it's all about telling your cameraman what you want. So went out with him to do a story. The federal member said that he would wrestle a crocodile if the crocodile, the local basketball team, got into the finals, right? They got into the finals. He goes out to do this publicity stunt.
Yeah.
So we get all the normal stuff, and here he is, he's wrestling plastic crocodiles and just what we call pig facts, right? Picture opportunities. And he goes, all right, but you've got to kiss the crocodile, right? So they get out a little crocodile, they have the taped up mouth and everything else. Got the whole thing, and he goes to give it a kiss. And I said to the camera, I said, roll, I don't care what happens, just do not button off. Blah, 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 blah. And he kisses the crocodile, and the croc turns over in its own body length and just goes and whacks him across the side of the head, right? Knocks him out of frame, the politician.
Wow.
And so we just went with this whole up retorting in politics, revenge is everything, slow motion, crack across the side of the head with this crocodile, right? And from that day forward, he got nicknamed Crocodile Man. He didn't talk to me for weeks after that. But that was the power of a colour story. You know, we ran that after the weather. Just
like slow-mo. Like, oh.
It was just gold. It was just gold. You know, the power of the medium. So they're the ones that probably stick in my mind the most. You know, when you talk about narratives, and this is why I love these conversations, you go, people are weird creatures. You can sit there and prove it to them. I can sit them in front of 10 professors who can explain the science of coal seam gas to them, and they won't listen. You know, I did a documentary, a short documentary on the sinking of the Yongala years and years ago for the ABC, for Landlord. And we went and found the relatives of the relatives, effectively, and showed them the stuff that we had, the scientists, and they were utterly convinced that all the portholes on one side of the ship were open and that's why it sank. Not a shred of evidence to back it up. We couldn't get them off that horse. Once people get in their heads, you can't, they're really, really hard things to pull back. Once people are personally invested in a position, it's really hard to get them off it. And so this comes back to the communications narrative. It's what marketers seek to achieve. Hey, I'm a marketer now, right? So I'm a professional bullshitter. You go out there and you're trying to create a response in people. You're creating a happy response, make them feel good about something, and then they push the purchase button.
All this experience has led up to something, a book.
Yes, Polite Anarchy.
So tell me about this book and plug it. You're a marketing man. I want to see some unashamed plugs here.
Okay, yeah, look.
No, seriously, tell us about it.
Okay, look, the best thing I ever read about book writing was, I think it was Stephen King. And he said, you don't sit down and write a book has to fall out of it. If you sit down to force write a book, it won't happen. It's got to be in your head, right? Being a speechwriter, being a journo, being a whatever, this thing had been building itself in my head for years. And so it came out. And it is literally, it's the story of a little guy, a farm kid. His dad gets done over by the banks. Dad takes his own life in the end because he can't bear the fact that he's going to lose the farm, lose everything else. Son, daughter, and friend vow that they're going to get their revenge on the banks, and away they go. And through a series of events, right? And these are meetings I've sat in. So there's stuff in that book. It is a fiction, but believe me, I've been in the meeting. Right? And how a whole series of events combine that they actually end up winning, and the banks get knifed, but it also takes out an entire federal government at the same time, and the economy goes pulp, and everybody goes home to try and figure out what they're going to do next. Because effectively, if you bring down the banking system in Australia, you are going to bring down the national economy, right? And it's just how one little guy gets really determined and knows how to work a system, talks to his mates, and then a whole series of events combine and it collapses. It's like the anatomy of a disaster and how one person can bring the whole thing down. It's also based around my understanding through business and government, just how finely tuned some of these things are. Because when you're a speechwriter and stuff, I've read all these numbers. You know, you sit there and you look at it and go, so if we just do that to that and that to that, yes, no, we don't want to talk about it. Right, okay, very interesting.
Wow.
Right? So it's the culmination of 35 years experience in media, government, business, disaster management, all that sort of stuff. And as you go through, because I know a few people have read it, and they've just gone, that's just bullshit. People just don't behave like that. And a while I've sat in that meeting, I can tell you that's exactly what they're like. I mean, I've sat in rooms with, I remember myself and the CEO of the Gasfields Commission getting taken to a meeting in the minister's office. We walked in, there was 26 gas executives sitting in there. That was a really fun day. So
the names have been changed to protect the not so innocent.
Correct, right? So I know how these things get played. I've been there and done. And so
it's got 5 stars, if I may make the observation.
Yes, it has. It's been very well reviewed. I've got to say, selling books is a really hard thing to do. I know you've had an experience, right? Books, they're hard things to move around, but the reviews have been fantastic. I've been so pleased with the reviews. And a few people have taken it away and gone, wow, I really need to think about the way governments and stuff work. because there's a message in there. One of my friends read it and went, "Why didn't you just name the people?" And I said, "Because I would have been in court for the next 20 years." So,
yeah.
and
you would have been. So tell us about this. Is leading somewhere. Tell us about your take on democracy. Oh, cynical.
Oh, okay. So here's a game to play at dinner parties for you. All right. The game is really simple. How many countries are there in the world? Most people can't answer that question.
226, I think.
Oh, that's not bad. That's the most accurate answer I've heard in a long time. I think it was about 206 the last time I looked. It's all based on what the UN recognises, okay? Yeah. So there are people who call themselves a country who aren't actually officially recognised by the UN, Taiwan, Georgia, a couple of others, right? They're not hard to find. And so you end up at around the 210 mark, okay? And every time I check on Wikipedia, it changes. So, which is also very interesting. So if there's 200, let's just call it round figures. There's 200 countries in the world. Let's just say round figures that are recognised, right? How many of those countries have a genuine democracy, as in you can really freely vote, okay? Have a free-speaking media, so the media can criticise anybody it wants or take anybody to task it wants, and an independent judiciary. How many countries of those 200 odd in the world have those as their basis? If you get past 20, you're wrong.
No, I'd say outside of the Anglosphere. I think about this a bit, actually. It's funny you should raise this topic. I'd say outside of the Anglosphere, I wouldn't even, to be candid, I wouldn't even include much of continental Europe in that. Although they're democracies, like arguably the EU has distorted things so badly that the nation state really no longer exists. And you've got a bunch of technocrats in Brussels. Now, I know this sounds Brexity because I'm kind of pro-Brexit, and I don't know your opinion on it. You may disagree, but if you're not in the Anglosphere, you're not in a democracy.
Well, see, you could put up an argument that the US fails the test because they don't have an independent judiciary. They elect their judicial figures and they're political, right? So you can put up an argument that the world's greatest democracy, that it's enforcing democracy around the world, isn't really one anyway, if you want to go down that path, right? So once again, dinner party conversation, I can hear people yelling at the screen as I'm talking. It's just a really interesting thing to do because it means that what we say is the greatest thing in the world to do is actually really one of the most unusual. We are in a minority. You know, everything we're doing, it's a minority. It's not a majority. It's not how the rest of the world thinks. And so you have to get your head around these things. I mean, I remember sitting in Iraq when they set up the parliament in Iraq with my interpreters. There were 2 interpreters. And so this is being televised live. And they've just looked at me and gone, "What is this? Is this what you call democracy?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's just like old women arguing." Yeah, well, there you go. Right. So they couldn't get their heads around it.
Well, see, so, it's not just, and really quickly, please, hold that train of thought, but it's not just geographically that's true. It's historically. Like really, you go back, mate, if you go back to the turn before the First World War, look, you talk to people about that basic history. Germany had and wasn't even a constitutional monarchy. Germany had a monarchy. Russia had a monarchy. Like really, it was the First World War that changed continental Europe into democracy in inverted commas, and and Russia went communist anyway. So you're right. This is such a strange experiment. It's such a strange idea. We don't even really know what it means, and we're still sorting it out. You're spot on.
And so the world, if you use the old cliche, the world's got a smaller place because we can go to anywhere we want. Right? People go along, have this really weird idea that, and we have laws around, for God's sake, that everybody's going to behave like we behave. And it's just not the case. It's just not true. Right? So, doing business, I remember, once again, by the way, it is definitely a fiction. I was in Mexico and I ran into this Canadian guy who was running an investment private equity firm. They bought this really old historic tile making shop, right? So making ceramics, okay, was part of the thing. And I just, everybody went running off to look at all the pots, and I'm just saying, well, what the hell brings you here? And so we're going through it all. I said, so is the price of doing business here everything I believe it to be? And he said, absolutely. So what you do is you bring 10% to the table is usually the figure. He said, we've got it down to 5. We're trying to get it down to 3. I went, what do you mean? Well, so, we had to buy the mayor a a four-wheel drive, and we have to do blah, blah, blah. So it's on the take. So how are all these US companies who've got all these anti-bribery laws, and we said, oh, what they're doing is they're franchising it off. So what you do is you go in, so I better not name companies because I'll probably get all hostile, right? But they go in and they get a Mexican partner, 50% of the company, no voting rights, goes out and does all the bribing for you. Then you're fine. Because you can't do business in Mexico without paying bribes. I mean, going across the borders all the way through Central America was one of the most bizarre experiences I've ever come across. You know, you hand your passport over and you put a $10 note in it, otherwise it doesn't get stamped.
Exactly. Like, it's just, I lived out of Mongolia and China for a little while. And anytime I have conversations, you know, people always talk about cultures and stuff like that. And it's kind of true. But the cultural values that we have here, which are fundamentally Judeo-Christian, really just are not shared by almost everybody else in the world. And if you include China in almost, and if you kind of say, well, China's definitely not a Western country, straight up, that's 1 person in 5 in the world who do not share our values. So they don't view human life the same way that we do. They don't even view they don't even have the same idea of truth. Like, it's not that they're in their own minds dishonest, but when you say truth, it's like, well, you know, you're dealing with a whole bunch of Pontius Pilates who sit there and go, truth? What is truth? You know, they're kind of like this weird concept. What are you appealing to? Are you appealing to science? Are you appealing to my personal experience? Are you appealing? It just gets so complicated.
Yes, it does. And that's the
people
thing,
don't even view human life, the value of human life, the way that we do. And we don't even really live that. You're spot on.
Yeah, you know, and go to South America and just, you know, what are the 2 biggest languages on the planet? English and Spanish. If you can't speak Spanish, you can't travel in South America, pretty much, right? You've got to get your head around Spanish. And there are so many things we miss, I think. You know, people think it's all going to go along the way it's been going, and this democracy thing is all just a beautiful piece. I'm on the, you know, the Interstellar Senate, you know, the Galactic Senate. I really am. I'm almost on that page. It's going to, what we do and the way we do it is going to have to change. And like I keep saying, we seem to have reached a turning point here. And certainly, mind you, I said we reached a turning point, you know, September 11 too, but everything just went back. But so we'll wait and see what actually falls out of all this. But, you know, communications is really showing up as a big issue. Politics is really coming up as a big issue. So where do we go and how do we go forwards from here?
This long form conversation, you wouldn't think it would resonate with people, but it is. People actually like long form discussions where you discuss complex issues with nuance, that you haven't got your snap grab narratives. People are going beyond that. And what it comes right down to is people aren't stupid. I think one of the reasons that Northern Vibe is going okay for a Gumby from North Queensland who just kind of chats to people is I genuinely, bottom of my heart, do not think that my listeners are stupid. I don't think they need me to frame anything for them. I don't think they need me to say, you need to think this. I don't think they need me to form a narrative or fit it in. I think what people want to hear is, how about this? How about this? And let's kind of discuss it and get a nuanced discussion. People seem to be resonating. They like it, you know, so that's...
I'm with you. I mean, if you treat people like they're stupid, then you're the dumb one. So it's, you know, you've got to put stuff out there so people can hear ideas. I reckon people are starved for genuine information. I reckon they're starved for it. There's information everywhere overloaded on the internet, but it's so bloody hard to find the right stuff.